Revelations of the unmarked remains of Indigenous children buried at former residential school sites over the past several months was stunning news from coast to coast to coast. It seemed to have hit this country in such a way that many expected it to put reconciliation and Indigenous issues front and center. And then the election was called. With us for their impressions of those issues in the campaign, and as is our custom, we'll introduce our guests from furthest away to closest to our studio, starting in Thunder Bay, Ontario, with Willow Fiddler, reporter for the Globe and Mail. In Ottawa, Cindy Blackstock, Executive Director, First Nations Child and Family Caring Society of Canada. And in Ontario's capital city, Pam Palmater, Professor and Chair in Indigenous Governance at what is, at least for now, still called Ryerson University. And Riley Yesno, a PhD student at the University of Toronto, working on questions to do with the attitudes of Indigenous youth, and who has plain and simply the best Twitter handle I've ever seen in my life. She is found at Riley Yesno Maybe. That is perfect, Riley. I love that. Welcome, everybody, to this discussion tonight here on TVO. I want to start by just playing a clip from Steve Bonspiel. This is from an episode of this program 6 years ago on whether Indigenous people should vote in Canadian elections. 2015. Sheldon, if you would.
My argument is that, first of all, it's a foreign system, so we should not be participating. But second of all, that if we merely partake in this election, it doesn't mean that we're going to get the results that we want. It doesn't mean that things are going to change in terms of how the government deals with us, which is very paternalistic. It doesn't mean that we're going to get more land back. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to get our point across and be equal partners at the table.
Cindy Blackstock, let me start with you, and I'd like to hear everybody on this. Do you think that still represents the majority of Indigenous opinion here today?
It's a complicated decision to make. I mean, we are independent nations and we want to be respectful of our own governments. But I personally choose to vote in the election because I want to influence how the government is relating to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, which has been historically very colonial and still is.
Pam Palmater, how about you?
I think a significant number of people feel that way, that, you know, why vote for your next oppressor, your next colonizer? And then there's other people who would normally not vote because of that idea, but they want to vote as a form of harm reduction. So not so much, hey, I support this party, but oh my goodness, let's make sure we don't get that party in. And then there's a large number of people who, equally valid, want to vote and want to participate and try to influence the outcome of the election for good purposes or to keep bad people out.
Are you going to vote?
No.
Do you ever vote?
No.
Gotcha. Riley, how about to you? Are you, what do you think about this view that these are elections put on by our colonial oppressors and therefore we ought not to participate?
I think that that's a really valid take for a lot of Indigenous people. I mean, I think that the clip you just showed from 2015 still resonates for many folks. And I sat here, nodding my head because the fact is that Canada, can't exist without the continued dispossession of Indigenous people, of taking our lands, our resources, and using those to profit. And so for a lot of people, it feels like, why would I vote for any oppressor? And for Indigenous people whose key concerns are some of the things that Steve mentioned in that clip, things like sovereignty, things like land back, no Canadian party, I think at this point at least, has ever presented an option that says that they will secure those things for us. And so it also feels like you're not really voting for something that's going to bring meaningful change. But I also agree with what Pam was saying about how we can see the vote as an act of harm reduction as well. And that's sometimes what I bring in my mindset to the ballot. And I have voted in every election I've been able to for those reasons.
You have voted and you will vote this time as well?
Yes, I already did. Advanced polling.
Gotcha. Okay. Willow, you're the last one. What do you say on this?
I agree. It's a complicated question. Whether or not Indigenous people participate in the election process. And then I'll just point out again, Merrick McLeod's question at the leaders' debate last week. Another important question that Indigenous voters ask is, why should we trust any government who makes promises after 150 years of oppression, basically, and colonial systems that we've lived under?
Do you vote in this election, Willow?
I will vote. I haven't yet. I will, though.
And have you voted in the past?
I have, yes. I have, and then both. I've been both a voter and a non-voter.
I wonder if, what should we do here? Cindy, would you attempt to try to convince Pamela why she ought to vote, even though she never does?
No, I wouldn't, because I think her choice is legitimate. What we're doing is we are, all of us on this panel, really pressing for the proper changes. A vote is just one way of doing that. Pam spends her entire life pushing for that change. And that actually is far more important. We need to, as a collective, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, push every single day for the types of solutions that are already on the books. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, the Murder of Missing Indigenous Women and Girls calls for justice, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples recommendations. There's so many solutions, and all of us need to be pushing, but not just us. The non-Indigenous population, they need to be pushing and holding their own elected leaders accountable for the lack of action. They choose to perpetrate these injustices in government. It isn't a failure. It isn't a mistake. It's a choice by this government and others before it to perpetrate these harms.
All right. Conversely, Pamela, would you care to try to convince the other three why it's a waste of their time to vote and they should do like you and not vote?
No, never. And there's lots of reasons why. Because under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, not only do we have the right to be self-governing, sovereign and autonomous over our own territories and governments, we also have the right as people who have been colonized, occupied territories, to participate in the colonizing government as we choose. We have that right, and it's an important right. And so I think, voting is part of it. But, I agree with Cindy. I think if the only thing Canadians ever did was vote, we'd be in a lot of trouble. We need to encourage Canadians not just to use their numbers to vote, but to also take action and push and hold governments to account. That's where the real change comes in. Voting is like the least a citizen could do.
Understood. All right, I'm going to move on here. And Willow, why don't I start with you on this one? We well remember how shocked non-Indigenous Canadians were, I think it's fair to put it that way, with the discovery of the grave sites unmarked near residential schools. It really shook the country. And then the election got called. And I'd like your sense about how significant those discoveries have been throughout the course of this election campaign.
Well, it's a question I'm hearing is why aren't these issues kind of front and center during this campaign? And I think the fear, the concern of having such a quick election under these circumstances of a global pandemic. I mean, the third election in 6 years. I think really puts a lot of pressure on Indigenous voters when it comes to these issues that we're seeing, like the burials and all of that. I mean, I think generally speaking, there's a concern and fear that Indigenous issues are going to be pushed back further anyway, and there's the risk of that in an election. And under these circumstances, I think that's even more so. But these aren't, I mean, the burials, I just need to point out, I mean, that this hasn't been forgotten by Indigenous people, by survivors and their families and their communities. And it's been an opportunity for the political parties to kind of really take hold of that. And I don't think we've been seeing a lot of that this time around.
Well, that's what I want to find out. Riley, the opportunity has been there for this to be a much more prominent issue during the campaign than it perhaps has been. Do you think the opportunity has been seized by the mainline political parties?
I mean, I certainly think the opportunity has been seized, but I also think it's kind of gross, right, that we're framing it as this now in an election time. I feel two conflicting sort of things about this, and one is that, it hasn't been talked about enough, that Indigenous issues generally have not been talked about enough in the election campaigns. And then we see parties like, say, the Conservative Party, who commit to only the TRC commitments that deal with unmarked graves and burials, and it effectively becomes a way for them to, scapegoat their lack of commitment by dealing with this thing that they think is the trendy, only thing people are talking about at the time, and not actually deal with many of the other meaningful things that Indigenous people have been calling for decades and centuries. And so it's an interesting to see how it's playing out, and I think it's very telling the way Canadians only a couple months ago, right, were wearing their orange shirts and flying their flags half-mast, and now so many people are lining up to vote for political leaders who, will talk about the benefits of residential schools, or who in the last few years have promised the world to Indigenous people and delivered next to nothing. It's really telling from an outside perspective to watch the Canadian electorate.
Pamela, how about you? The momentum that we saw on these issues earlier before the election was called, do you still see it happening now?
Well, here's what I see. The momentum that we had of being in the media almost died overnight when the election was called. But the momentum within Indigenous communities and the Canadian population hasn't stopped. But there's a disconnect because you don't see that momentum continuing on with the federal party leaders, either in the debates, their platforms, or what they're advocating. So there's a real disconnect. And think about the single most prominent issue in the media over the last 2 years, aside from the pandemic, has been Indigenous issues. You know, Cindy's court case, the federal government continues to litigate against First Nations kids in foster care. Department of Fisheries and Oceans trying to stop Mi'kmaq people from fishing. Even now, still, 1492 Land Back Lane, that went on for well over a year. Wet'suwet'en strong protests, murdered of missing Indigenous women and girls. I mean, dominated the media. This should have been the single most important issue addressed by these federal party leaders, because Canadians, as we know from the recent surveys, said their number one issue was Indigenous issues, that reconciliation was going to be a priority in how they vote. How could the federal party leaders not be so connected to what Canadian citizens themselves are saying?
Well, Cindy Blackstock, I know you love to collect old reports. Do you have anything that might help us understand our current circumstances any better?
Yeah, one of the things that I'd like to say is that when we have 5,000 children in unmarked graves now, that is 15 children for every member of parliament who will be running for election. Think about that. And the survivors left the work plan for the country in the TRC's calls to action. But there has been tons of reports. This one is from 1967. I would have been 3 years old, and it was talking about the need for equity and culturally based, quote, Indian education back then. And it has a section on public opinion that I think is really relevant. It says the proposals made in this study are not likely to be adopted on the scale or with the speed required unless public opinion changes too. And an alert and informed public will bring about the changes that are needed. Public indifference will result in sluggish political action, low budgets, and poorly conceived projects with low priorities. That's exactly what's happening. And what we need to embrace as people is that the government serves us. What they often want to do is just get our vote and then let them leave alone for 4 years. Well, that can't happen on this because Canada's a repeat offender when it comes to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children. First through residential schools, the 60 scoop, and now in violation of 20 legal orders to stop discriminating against First Nations children in foster care and to ensure that First Nations children get adequate public services. So this is not a time to turn away. We need to really take hold of our power as individuals to press for change and tell the federal government, whoever is in power, you are only going to get in power if you're really committed to do this. And if you don't follow through, we're going to take you out.
Riley, I want to start this next round with you, and that is there are apparently 77 Indigenous candidates running in this election, and that's an all-time high. And it's up from 61 in 2019, so that's up a lot. What do you infer from that?
I think that shows just how active Indigenous people are. The fact that we're having this conversation about to vote, not to vote, the benefits, and why that's all part of, our collective struggle towards liberation for Indigenous people. To see so many Indigenous candidates running means that, there are many people pursuing different theories of change within our communities. Ultimately, I think in many cases for the betterment of us all, right? And so I think that also shows that as much as we're saying, voting is whatever, that there are people out there who also see this as, a way to get voice into parliament. And I often think when I think about Indigenous representation in politics, right, that where I see the most benefit that it can have is to be able to act as another layer of harm reduction in Parliament. Do I think that Canada or any Canadian elected officials, Indigenous or not, are ever going to, again, bring sovereignty, land back, all those things? Probably not. But do I think that they can vote against some really harmful and regressive bills? Absolutely. And so I can respect that theory of change for many people.
All right, let me put that to Pamela. Pamela, you've told us already you don't vote, you've never voted, and yet here are Indigenous people who are actually running to serve in the Parliament of Canada. And some of them, no doubt, will win. What's your take on that?
I think that's great. All the different ways in which Native people are actively working to pursue change in the way that they feel they can, using the opportunities they can, I think that's fantastic. I think we just have to be careful about what we expect from that. So can we expect that sole Indigenous MP is going to be able to counter bad things in their party? No, they have to toe the party line. So while they are Indigenous candidates, we just have to remember that they're members of parties. They must toe the party line, and that's important to remember. And it's also important to remember we have some real heroes. Former NDP MP Romeo Saganash been so effective at speaking out, at lobbying, and he was part of the many Indigenous people who tried to bring forward the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I mean, there's a force behind Indigenous peoples who are there with their, traditional cultural values and are always working forward to change. So I embrace all our warriors out there trying to advocate in the best way they can.
Yeah, Willow, I note that in the Ontario legislature, when Saul Mamakwa gets up to ask a question, he gets something that no other MPP in that chamber gets, and that is he gets silence. People listen. They show him a level of respect that they don't show any of the other MPPs. So what's your view on whether a single Indigenous MP, in this case, can make a difference?
Yeah, Saul's been a really interesting case. He's kind of has a reputation here in the North. He's very community grounded in his own community and the communities in here. He's established a relationship beforehand. And I think it's part of, we're kind of seeing that strategy playing out in the NDP this time around. Well, I mean, actually the couple of times anyways. And when it comes to the Indigenous vote, using Indigenous candidates to garner those votes is a strategy that could be effective. And I think that's kind of what the NDP is hoping for. There's ridings, significant ridings with high First Nations voters, and those could have the potential to determine outcomes in those ridings. One of those is here in northwestern Ontario in Kenora, where there's an Indigenous candidate for the NDP, and not only that, but Tanya Cameron, who's organizing behind the scenes there, really is connected, established, knows how to do the work, and if there's any chance that an Indigenous candidate will win, it's because of that work behind the scenes, and I think on the ground that makes it happen.
Riley, let me follow up on that with you, because in 2015 and in 2019, there was, I think, a significant push by many in the Indigenous community to get people, in particular young Indigenous people, out to vote. Is that push still happening this time around?
Yeah, I think it is. I will say I don't know to what success. I think that Indigenous youth, obviously, there's a real vested interest for political parties in this country to campaign to Indigenous youth as poorly as they do it. We're the fastest growing population in this country. For long-term party building, this is a demographic that they would absolutely need to be able to convince that they are the best leaders and the best party. But I think young people, they are always on the front lines. Indigenous young people are always on the front lines of our resistance movements. They have grown up seeing the violence that Canada has enacted on our people, and I think are some of the most radical community members that we have from coast to coast to coast. And so I think that perhaps more so than in my grandparents' generation, in my grandparents' circles, my colleagues have really intense conversations about whether or not voting is worth it, whether or not we want to be part of this system at all. And more people, I think, identifying with their nations rather than with Canadians, which has effect come election time.
In which case, Cindy, maybe you could give some advice to the non-Indigenous people who are watching this right now and who, when they go to the ballot box, those who haven't voted in the advance polls, when they do that on September 20th, what you would like to have them think as they get set to mark their X somewhere on the ballot.
It's not only asking them key questions about what they're going to do specifically to implement the TRC calls to action, the murder of missing Indigenous women and girls calls for justice, and to stop litigating against survivors and First Nations kids in court. It's a question of character. There are kind of two kinds of leaders. There's people who want to be someone, and then there's people who want to do something, that have the moral courage to stand up against their party when necessary, to put the people first. That's the kind of leader that I want to vote for. I don't want someone like I have currently in my riding who won't even respond to constituents' emails when they disagree with her platform. That's not the type of leadership that we should be voting for under any circumstances. So that question of moral courage is important. And I think Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jane Philpott show that even when you are morally courageous and you stand up for good governance, that means that you might be tossed out. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. You have to act with integrity, and you have to take on those difficult issues if we're not going to have kind of a government that is just democracy in name only.
You're going to forgive this follow-up question, but it seems pretty obvious. Do you want to tell us who you're voting for or who you think other people should vote for?
Well, I can't tell you who I'm voting for. I actually already voted. But I voted for the party that had the most in terms of the campaign on First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and also on the environment, which I also care a lot about. And I also voted for the leader that I felt had the most integrity. And I'm hoping other people will do that too.
I'm not going to leave it to myself to infer what that meant. So do you want to fill in the blanks?
No, I think people can go and look at those platforms. I try to be a nonpartisan. I think people have to vote with their hearts, not vote because Cindy Blackstock is voting in a certain way. I think that when we demand change, we have to push for it. And so I do that not only on voting day, but of course in courtrooms and in public across the other 365 days a year.
Indeed you do. All right, Pamela, do you want to offer our viewers and listeners any advice on who you think's got the best platform out there as it relates to Indigenous people?
Let's say it's not the Conservatives. It's not the People's Party of Canada. So, you can look at the other platforms, but we have to be careful. What I would want people to do is not necessarily look at individual candidates, because literally your best friend could be running in the election. Your mom could be running in the election. But what does the platform stand for? And does it stand for human rights? Does it stand for Indigenous reconciliation, climate change, social equality, ending systemic racism? If you can answer yes to all of that, then you've got several platforms to choose from. However, if you've got a platform like the Conservatives that is attacking human rights and want to reinstate, get rid of the gun ban and, roll back women's rights on abortion, these are very regressive policies. So I wouldn't tell them which one to vote for, but I'd say definitely not the Conservatives or the People's Party.
Even though there are Indigenous people who are running for the Conservative Party?
Alleged Indigenous people. So of the 77, it's important to remember some of them are only declaring or identifying as Indigenous during this election. So we have to assume if these are the 77 self-identified people, we don't know that they're actually Indigenous. That's another thing to be careful for. Okay,
Riley, how about you? Any advice for those watching or listening?
Yeah, I will say having analyzed all the platforms, I would say that I think, just reading from the top, that the NDP have the strongest platform when it comes to Indigenous issues. But I say this with, the caveat, and it's a big one, right? When we think back to, say, 2015 election, Justin Trudeau also had, at that time, the best platform I had seen for Indigenous people ever. He made so many pretty promises, and here we are 6 years later with so little to show for it. So, Also, that platform doesn't necessarily mean anything when we see what impact we want. What actually matters is what meaningful day-to-day changes Indigenous people see and feel on the ground. And that's something that's going to take a lot more than just a vote to get. But I will echo that probably not the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, who I've seen throughout this campaign actively try and rewrite the relationship with Indigenous people. You know, if you watch the debate, you saw Justin Trudeau just straight up lie about taking Indigenous kids to court. You saw Erin O'Toole say that Canada has always been a country that stood against apartheid, as if the Indian Act is not on the books right now. And so that off the hop, you know, shows that those are parties that are so out of touch with the reality of this country and of Indigenous people, and are not somebody that I would say could get my vote.
Willow,
and Steve, if I can just say,
yeah,
one of the things that I think we need to really watch out for is when any party says, oh, the reason we haven't made any progress is because we're talking to First Nations, Métis, or Inuit people. That's ridiculous. We have been calling for change for decades and hundreds of years. It is inappropriate to foist responsibility for government's lack of action and accountability onto First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. That's disgusting to me.
Riley, you did something there. What was that?
I was snapped. Like when you see a good slam poem or something.
Gotcha. Okay. Willow, I got a feeling, given that you're with the Globe and Mail and you're a journalist covering this stuff, that I shouldn't ask you who you think people should vote for. So I'll give you a pass on that one. But maybe I can turn it to this in our remaining moments here. If the, as you call it, the colonial parliamentary system has been unable to deliver justice to Indigenous people for more than a century and a half in this country, what is the next option Indigenous people are thinking about?
Good question. You know, I think there's so much work being done by First Nations and Indigenous communities, you know, nonpartisan work that really addresses a lot of these issues when it comes to, you know, clean drinking water. I think in Escanaga, for example, and their ongoing troubles of getting their boil water advisory lifted. And you know, this and the one thing I'm hearing is, you know, enough of this kind of Ottawa knows best approach, Ottawa, you know, top down. It doesn't work like that. It has to start from the community. It starts from there. And I'm just echoing what others have said, in that, you know, that they have the solutions, and they just need to be listened to. I mean, we've got reports that outline all of this work. You know, we don't need another political party to come in and start fresh. That's not what Indigenous and First Nations communities and people need. You know, a lot of these issues, they don't see them as partisan issues, and they're not. When it comes to clean drinking water, that's not a reconciliation issue. That's a human rights issue. We know that, and we have to act on that. And you know, I don't have anything optimistic to say in terms of how that work is going to get done at this point in an election.
Let me give the last minute then to Pamela on that question. If the parliamentary system of this country hasn't delivered justice for Indigenous people, what next?
Well, I think it brings the country system into disrepute. We already know that policing on a wide scale has already been brought into disrepute. Canadians are well aware of systemic racism, brutality, and corruption, and it'll be the same thing with this government. So oftentimes people fear, oh, what will Indigenous peoples do? I think they need to be thinking about, what will Canadians do? What will Canadians think? How will they react? What is going to be the path forward with Canadians if Canadians no longer see themselves as part of a legitimate government? You can't say you're a world champion defender of human rights and then continue to commit atrocious human rights abuses and not even address the ongoing genocide. So I think we really need to be saying, what's this going to mean for Canada moving forward if they start thinking they don't have a legitimate government?
As you four always do when you appear on this program, you give us so much to think about. So thank you for coming here tonight. Willow Fiddler, Cindy Blackstock, Pam Palmater, Riley Yesno. Be well, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.